Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back again to another video. So, considering that it's been talk of the time recently, I thought I'd give my own take on is pirating video games morally acceptable? In most cases, I would agree, especially if the studio that makes the game is not even not even there anymore. So let's take a look at a couple examples that I'll kind of give my take why I do think this. So first off, we have the recent news about Ubisoft. As you can see here, news has screen situation on Steam is a digital nightmare. When games started making the switch from physical to digital, everyone knew there were trade-offs. Digital downloads were quicker and more convenient, but it mean you didn't entirely own the game you bought. You were just licensing it, making you subject to whims and features solvency of the company behind it. These problems seem to be far-fetched. Case now we're watching them play out in real time, and Ubisoft is at the center of the mess. What they're referring to is that Ubisoft is delisting Assassin's Creed Liberation HD, which was a HD version of a PSP Assassin's Creed game. So, and this has obviously caused a lot of outrage. So I'm like, why is Ubisoft doing this in the first place? They didn't exactly say why, because originally it was thought that you could even play it at all after the delisting, but they later clarified saying that that you could still play it, but that's not the point. Like, why is Ubisoft doing this? Why are they delisting it? It's not like they don't own the rights to it. I mean, because they're the ones who developed the game and published it, so it's like, why delist it? That makes zero sense. Unless they're planning on doing some kind of stupid, collection, I guess, but like how realistically is Ubisoft willing to do that though? You know what I mean. I believe they did a collection of Assassin's Creed games before. I forgot what it was called if they did, but that's not the point. So, and they're not the only ones to be delisting games only to sell an inferior version. Look at Rockstar. Remember GTA Definitive Edition? Anybody? Or or Sonic Origins in the most recent case, where Sega delisted all the older versions of Sonic 1, 2, and 3, because of Sonic Origins coming out. And what do you know? In most cases that Sonic Origins screwed up. So in some cases, like with the music in Sonic 3. So yeah, no, that alone made it Origins inferior in my opinion. But that could be just nostalgia. But the music in the original version is so freaking god tier. So, so Ubisoft's not the only one who was in the news because that caused this conversation. As out of freaking nowhere, Nintendo has out of nowhere now made the Wii Shop channel and DSi Shop accessible again after they were suffering outages for months. Because I remember covering this because this was like so strange. It was back in March. Keep in mind, people, the outages happened back in March, and Nintendo finally got off their ass and actually fixed it. It really took them 4 months to address like an outage like that, like where you could even re-download your games, mind you, that you bought on those two digital shops anymore. You can't even buy games off those shops anymore, as they shut the DSi Shop down in 2017 and the Wii Shop channel in 2019. And they're going to be doing the same in 2023 with the Wii U and the 3DS. So again, this is another case of Nintendo doesn't give a flying shit about game preservation, which is why with every new console you gotta start all the way over from a clean slate. So I know they apparently said they don't want to go through that again with their next system, but I'll believe it when I see it. Considering Nintendo doesn't have a good track record with actually respecting your digital purchases. Just saying. Considering how much of a joke their online services are. And if so, anybody? Yeah. So yeah, that's another case of why piracy is a thing, is considered possibly a morally thing. So by some people. But I'll give my take on that later. And why another example of why. I mean, there's more examples. Because do you remember last year when Sony tried to deactivate the stores for the PlayStation 3, the PSP, and the Vita? Y'all remember that? Let me refresh your mind. Because back in, I think it was last March of last year, or something like that. It was somewhere around that time frame. Sony announced they were shutting down the PlayStation 3, the Vita, and the PSP stores, and they got so much backlash that they, essentially did it 180 for the most part by, not deactivating the PS3 and Vita stores, but they did shut down the PSP one, which I kind of get because that was the system from 2004. So I kind of get why Sony did that. But again, though, so it's them blocking access from leaving some digital only games that you can't buy anymore. So you get what I'm saying, though. These companies, we still got one more to go before I say what I was about to say. And there's obviously, Big Daddy Microsoft with the whole, remember the whole DRM bullshit disaster that we went through early this year? Where you like those whole talk about licensing and all that nonsense. All that bullshit. Y'all remember that? Oh, I sure do. And I'm sure a lot of people sure do, because that was for a whole fucking weekend. Like, you could even play your freaking single-player games. I remember one infamous example was the original Dead Space. So I'm excited for I'm excited for the potential of that remake. By the way, that's coming out in January. So hopefully they know that. So anyway, back to the topic at hand. You see why? So here's my thing. Do I think? And also, as you can see in the game, in the gameplay you're seeing is Spider-Man Web of Shadows, which is a game that's been delisted for, I think, I believe it was like right after Amazing Spider-Man 2 came out, which that was the last Spider-Man game that Marvel game Activision actually made. So, and you can't buy those games physically, digitally anymore. You cannot because Marvel took the licensing back. So after Amazing Spider-Man 2, so. And so can I buy the game? Nope. I haven't been able to for 8 fucking years. And why do you think people are actually asking for like remasters and all that? Because they want to buy these games again because like they're great. Like people, miss those games and it's becoming so expensive. Unlike because you would have to buy a 360, a PS3 or whatever or a Wii to play Web of Shadows again. Unless you can pirate it on PC. So, which admittedly I did, because to be fair, without piracy, I probably wouldn't have been able to play Web of Shadows again, to be quite honest with you. So, the fact that I've been able to, because it was a blessing, because I still love the game after all these years, and the game is almost 14 years old. God, that just makes me feel freaking old. So I think it's morally okay to pirate games, especially ones where the studio doesn't even exist anymore. In Web of Shadows' case, or much older games. So like for example, I'm trying to think of some other ones. Obviously, Beanox is still around, but they made some Spider-Man games, and you can't buy those anymore digitally. So, since again those are delisted because of the whole thing with Marvel and all that. And what about the Transformers? The absolutely god tier War and Fall for Cybertron games from High Moon Studios. You can't buy those games either because those were delisted too. So yeah. So there's plenty more examples. So like in those cases, I think it is perfectly okay to pirate them. On PC because you can't really pirate games on like console or anything like that unless you like jailbreak it and all that. But that's not the point. So like where it becomes the gray area for me is brand new games. Like because there was an infamous article that Kotaku put out about Metroid Dread, if you remember, concerning that there's an emulator for the Switch already where people actually got the ROM for that game and were essentially pirating it by playing it on a Switch emulator around the time the game was coming out, and that caused a whole debate because Nintendo infamously ignored the Metroid series for so long, and it was like the first 2D Metroid in over a decade initially when that game came out. So in those examples, I do not condone piracy at all. But when it comes to like older and like much older games, yeah, I think it's more than okay, especially since, you know, it's when publishers are essentially taking your games away that you freaking bought. And most of the time, it's because so they can sell you, you know, essentially resell you the game you already bought. And speaking of which, I forgot to mention this with the whole Ubisoft bullshit. Like, you can't even, you will not even be able to play the DLC up for that game. Or the games that they were delisting. There were some other ones, like Far Cry 3 was another one. I think there was some other ones too. You you get what I'm saying though? Like, the how the game industry handles preservation is an absolute joke. It is an absolute fucking joke. Like, people are paying their, you know, hard-earned money when they buy these games. So, oh, I also forgot to mention this. Like, I know people like to say, "Oh, buy the games physically." I'm like, in in some cases, especially on Xbox, like, you don't even have the actual game on the disc, because look at Assassin's Creed Valhalla, for example, because that is infamously only one gig on the freaking disc. I know that apparently, like, Halo Infinite's campaign wasn't on the disc for that, in that you couldn't play it offline essentially without the day one update. So, but that might have been so that, you know, it wouldn't get leaked, but even then it still did. So, especially months beforehand. So, infamously. So, you know, but that's a whole different thing. So yeah, this is kind of again, the gaming industry and how it preserves games. It's a fucking joke, and it probably won't change unless, you know, actual government intervention, because they're not gonna self-govern themselves with how games are preserved and all that. Now, the only games like where I can see where preservation would be impossible is like always online games, like Destiny, like MMOs, for example, like World of Warcraft, Destiny, you know, games, you know, stuff like that. That's more understandable, where they can't be preserved because those are always online games. So, and once the servers are, you know, go down for good, it's gone. They're gone for good. So, stuff like that I get. But especially when it comes to like single player games, like you know, Spider-Man Web of Shadows, for example, or like Sonic Unleashed or something like that. So, when those games are delisted, like, they are gone for good, unless you somehow, you know, get the games on the native hardware. Where in Sonic Unleashed's case, it's not even on PC. So, I mean, I remember for like a while, Sega delisted it, but then they actually brought it back eventually. Thank goodness they did, because when that game was, like, you know, made back compat on Xbox, I immediately bought it essentially because that game is freaking amazing. So, Sonic Unleashed is absolutely great. That is a great 3D Sonic game, in my humble opinion. I've said that since day one. But anyway, so yeah, so the game industry is a fucking joke, and it seems like, you know, they're not gonna self-govern themselves. So basically, the only way is where it actually be taken seriously is that if some kind of lawmaker steps in. So, and how likely that is, not really, considering the government likes to screw us over. So, especially now with how expensive everything is right now. So, but yeah, so that's a whole different thing. That's not really relevant to the topic. So yeah, the game industry, you know, needs to freaking step their game up. No pun intended. When it comes to game preservation, because it basically, personally, I think like piracy in like cases like, you know, games are delisted is the best way to preserve those games. You know, so people can play them for as long as they want, pretty much. So yeah, game preservation is a fucking joke right now in the game industry, and it probably won't change because these companies don't give a shit. So, and the only way they'll give a shit is if, you know, if governments around the world step in. So, and how likely that is, probably not, considering they love to blame video games for when, you know, for school shootings and all that. But anyway, I think I'm out of here with this one. So I think I've gone on long enough about this topic. So what you guys think? Do you agree with me? Disagree? Let me know down in the comment section below. And if you like this video, hit the like button on the way out. It helps out the channel. And consider subbing to the channel so you do not miss out on any more videos. And I will see you all in the next one. Later.